When you look up the term supernatural strength, what you'll find is a picture of Nathan Todd. Nathan has been to the lowest lows dealing with multiple health issues stacked up at the same time, misdiagnoses, and a whole lot more. He literally found himself in a place of darkness, and if it weren't for his supernatural strength, fueled by his relationship with God, he never would have made it out. Check out this episode to hear Nathan's amazing story and to learn about how he's using the difficult times he conquered to help others today using faith as fuel. Nathan Todd, how are you doing?
Great. Really thankful to be here.
I'm thankful to be here. This is like, how did I even get here? This is wild. A random text message from you as I'm driving to the gym one morning at like 9 o'clock. And I was like, man, I was literally thinking about reaching out to you multiple times the past 2 weeks. You know how life gets in the way, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't. And I get this text, you're sharing all this new stuff that you're doing that I've been dying to hear about. And I remembered you lived in Fort Wayne, or I remember you lived in Indiana, but I wasn't sure when. Now I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, all right, God, if he says that he lives in Fort Wayne, which is where I'm going to be for 8 hours next week, I'm going to make this podcast happen. And here we are.
It's amazing. I just love synchronicities. Like that's how I live my life. There's just so many times in my life that God's made a marker for me to see things repetitively, or just the right person, the right time, or the right text. And the same thing, like literally you were on my heart as well, like obviously texting you.
Yeah.
And beyond just sharing what I'm doing, I just, care about what's happening in your life. So I love that that inspired me, getting that text back saying, I was just thinking about you.
Yeah, it was the truth, man. All right, so before we get into like all the cool things that you're doing that I can't wait to hear about, and just heads up, you sent me your website, but I did not look at it yet because I wanted you to tell me about it on the podcast.
Yeah.
But give me a brief introduction of who you are, and I guess we can get into what you've been through, because isn't that really why we're here?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I think a simple tagline to my life is heart and humor. And that has just followed me throughout my childhood till my adulthood. But in the process of owning that, it's been hard. I lived with two older brothers. I had a dad who was always in the front, making people laugh and leading them in different ways. And so there was, in my books, it felt like almost too much to try to follow the lead of two older brothers and a dad who was doing these unique and influential things in people's lives.
Like, what was he doing?
Well, from a young age, he was always leading in some capacity, whether that was like the youth or up front on a Sunday service, his business. He was a local business owner here in Fort Wayne for 35 years. He owned a business mortgage company. But beyond that, he was the president of the Association of the State of Indiana. So we were going to conferences and seeing him continuously always being in front of maybe thousands of people, if not, 100 or 200, always in front, and not having a thought about if this is going to be challenging. It just isn't his nature. And I never saw him playing for it either. Like, he just was one of those guys that showed up and, man, he impacted people in that moment. So with that, I had insecurity about it. Like, I always knew that I loved having spontaneous moments of making people laugh or inspiring. But the idea of owning my voice, like on this platform where people who I don't know are looking or listening, used to scare the blank out of me. And it still does, honestly. Like, I would feel more comfortable walking on a stage in front of hundreds of people than maybe sitting here not knowing what people are thinking or listening on the other side.
So it's funny because you say that kind of scares you, but that's what you do. Like, you speak to people and you mentor and you coach and all that. So what made you take the leap of faith and just start doing it?
Yeah. I have... I would say from a young age, know that I've heard God's voice, and I've always felt his closeness. And I've always felt the wind on specific things, and specifically around people, whether it was one-on-one or in groups. I just always felt just his presence, always felt just like, yes, this is where you're supposed to be. And I've been patient with it because I have, for the last 20 years, I'm 41, so 21 years now.
You're 41? I thought you were like 27.
It looks like that. I'm like an aged fine wine. But the last 21 years, I've been clear that this is a pathway. And I've served in different ways, whether small business or youth ministry. There's been aspects of just, childcare. I've always wanted to be in a space to learn, honestly, to serve and to learn. And over the years, my wife and I in particular have always felt called to offer ourselves in beautiful ways to have greater influence. And we've been patient. Like, we have waited and stewarded our time. And we've never felt like more than ever than this time that we were called to step into a place of actually owning our voice, owning our story, allowing people in over not just our life, but also the generations before. Because I deeply believe God faithfully puts our families in for a reason. It's not just my story, but it's my grandparents' stories. It's their grandparents' stories. And that there's something that when we offer that it opens up something bigger than just us. And so over the last 21 years, I've waited and I've been patient and learning, going to courses, taking different education classes, and just really when COVID happened and I went through shingles, as we talked about last time, in my eye, and then past kidney stones, we ended up having to have a company-wide layoff. It was honestly just a moment of like clarity, where I loved what I was doing. I loved the people who I was doing it with, but I never felt as if it was a forever thing. And I was always just kind of waiting for somebody to do something. And it took those unfortunate but fortunate circumstances to shake me and to realize, man, I'm created for so much more than just this moment. And I want to start putting my ducks in order to be able to make a way so that I can start offering myself in a way that I see myself already. And so it was a year last May that I officially left the company that I was working for. And it was bittersweet because they're like family. But it was also a launching pad of really trusting and believing in myself and believing what God spoke to me years ago. And not just, talking about it, because I could talk about it for years about this great inspirational thing or what I feel called to with comedy or all these other things to get people hyped up. But the reality was that I wasn't making the steps in the day to actually move towards that. And it came to a point where God was like, okay, let me help you a little bit. Now, I'm not saying he gave me shingles. I'm not saying that he gave me kidney stones. I personally believe we're responsible for our temple, our body. And there's choices that we make that can impact that. But at the same time, there's grace that covers it too. And so ultimately, his providence won the process.
I can relate. I know I've had God want me to go in certain directions, and I've been stubborn. And he will he will kind of scoot you that way.
Right.
And a lot of the time, it's not pleasant, but that's our fault. It was my fault. It wasn't pleasant. But in all the unpleasantries that I had to go through because of my disobedience, he pruned me and actually used those circumstances to make me better for today, for other people.
Yes.
So your story is wild, though. I feel like I have my own testimony, but it doesn't hold a candle to yours.
No.
So do you kind of want to just touch briefly or even dive into it and tell us about what exactly happened? Because I've heard your story, and the first time you told me, I remember we were on the Zoom, crying together. Two grown men crying on Zoom because of your story. And it was just it was touching. It was crazy. So you want to kind of go into that a bit? Yeah,
absolutely. I think, before getting into what we talked about on the last podcast, I think it actually it starts way before that. But what I really remember kind of waking up to, just the hard, I'm trying not to curse because honestly, I think sometimes language, the pain is real. And I think we're all, if we're vulnerable, there's moments where you're in your bedroom by yourself and you're wondering, God, do you care?
Yeah.
And it feels really lonely. And words can almost only describe that pain. And so that first time of really feeling that and embracing that was when I was diagnosed with bone cancer. And my wife and I, we were, I think, less than a year married. She just moved from Charlotte, North Carolina, doing Teach for America, where she loved the job. She loved what she was doing. But she trusted that I felt God was leading us to be up where we were living. And we were part of a small company, and we were failing. We successfully failed. We ended up partnering with another company, but in the midst of that, I had to give up my salary completely and trusting that we could get through and just keep the company running. In the midst of that, that's when I got diagnosed with bone cancer. And that was a moment of being like, God, do you really care? And this doesn't make sense because at the time as well, I was on staff at a local church, and this was a church that I still believe that God heals today. I believe that miracles are real, but this was a community to where we saw healings. Like we legitimately saw healings that are like mind-blowing, that like doctor approved, like, yes, you had this tumor, it's no longer here anymore. And so coming to this community and believing and seeing it, and then hearing that I'm diagnosed with a bone cancer and then not having it healed in the way that I thought was devastating. And I just remember being just depressed. The doctor said ultimately, like, listen, it's growing. We need to cut it out immediately. My hope is it's only stage 1, which means that it won't grow past what we get out, but we have to schedule surgery. So I had a month before surgery. And that month I was just literally weeping and praying all the time. So confused because it didn't make sense, right? In the order of things, I'm like, here I gave my life. I moved from Indiana out to Philadelphia, and the company's failing. I don't have an income coming in right now. My wife's working for a non-for-profit helping victims of crime. So she was making like peanuts, and we're living in per capita the top 10 most expensive places to live. Now, God faithfully had provided a house for us that we're paying $500 a month that really it should have cost about $3,000 a month, but we had favor with this family that we didn't know. They said, hey, we need $1,800 plus utilities, so it's going to be around $3,000. I said, well, we can afford $500. They said, okay.
Wow, that's a God thing.
Right, yeah. So I felt like I could see these things, but in the practical sense of my body, I felt like I kept hitting this wall of like not really feeling like God was with me because it didn't make sense of having to go through something so painful. And going through that, thankfully, it was stage 1, where they cut it out. It was close to my heart. I had some complications afterwards, but the truth and the gift is that I'm cancer-free, and I've been cancer-free since then. But that story hooked on to 2020, right, where we all went through a unique, challenging year, and maybe some of us still working through, just added to the pain because, our company was solely providing products for schools, and instantly they're gone. And so I'm sitting here thinking, am I going to have a paycheck? And at the same time, I started stepping out toward putting my foot in front of me to start stepping out and put myself in ways of like offering myself where I felt like with comedy and like serving and leading. And right in the moment of doing that, I ended up getting shingles in my eye. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't just in the eye, it was in my ear and it was in my throat. So imagine the worst pain you can feel and like times that by 10. Because the pain never left. It was a constant, like every moment, knowing and feeling like just raw, horrible pain. And in the midst of that, what was even more traumatic was the mental anguish that you go through in something like that. Because when you have shingles in your eye, you can't be around any light or any sound. Now, I had 3 children at the time that were all under the age of 6, and my wife was pregnant with our 4th. And here's something that I feel called and created to serve in and being a father and helping. And here I'm not knowing if our company's going to make it. And now I'm in a bedroom by myself with all the blinds closed, which that lasted for a week because even that was too extreme with light coming in just through the window shades. I had to go down to the basement. So for 40 days, I was basically blind in a basement by myself, just in complete pain. My wife, being that it was a disease to where she could have gotten it and it could have gone into our child, she couldn't be around me. She couldn't be affectionate with me. My children couldn't be affectionate with me because they didn't, at that time, they didn't have the vaccine for chickenpox. And so literally all my people can't touch me, and I literally can't physically be around them because the pain is like a knife in the eye every time hearing any kind of loud noise, where kids, they're just being kids. And I just was at a loss. I was completely at the bottom barrel of just pain. And most nights were me looking up at God with 2 middle fingers up, to be quite frank.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say it sounds embarrassing saying that, but that's just, it's hard to say that because I know his nature. I know that there's things I don't see, but in the middle of your pain, it's hard to see that. It's hard to see past your own pain. And so It continued on in regards to, as I'm healing from shingles, the doctor misdiagnosed me and ended up giving me a steroid that spread the shingles in my eye instead of healing my eye. So 40 days turned into 60 days, and 60 days turned into 4 months. And it was just never ending. In the midst of that, I got to have kidney stones to pass as well. And at that point, I remember going to the hospital with my wife, and I've got like a blindfold over my eyes because I can't like be around light. I've got the worst pain in, let's say, the baby making places. And I'm just like, I literally just started laughing because what are you going to do? Right? Like literally feeling like this is Job in the present day moment. And
so for those for the people that don't know who Job is, you want to just explain what happened to Job real quick?
Yeah, practically lost his whole family. All his resources were taken. There's just destruction after destruction after destruction. And then not only that, then his people coming to him and telling him, hey, buddy, what'd you do wrong? Like all his people basically saying, like, clearly you did something wrong to deserve this. And that's what I felt like. And, after passing the kidney stone, I'm like, all right, finally, like I have some reprieve. And the day before our son, Jonathan, was born, we ended up having a company-wide layoff. And so at this time, I'm the sole provider for our family. My wife and I, we thoughtfully wanted her to sow into our family and work full-time there. And we were feeling called for her to step out here at a recent time, like we were feeling like it was coming close, but at that time I still was the sole provider. We had no other resources coming in. And at that point, like I've heard that hard things happen in threes. So at some level, even though it was a horrible feeling that the company that I love can't provide to continue to move forward, that we have to lay everybody off, at the same time I felt like, okay, like there's something else on the other side of this. Mm-hmm. And that's my son, Jonathan. Jonathan David is his name. And I named him that because God has gifted me with my first prayer that I really remember in him like meeting me in. And that was, God, put men in my life that truly know you. That's how I met you. That's how I can list off 10 to 20 to 30 other men that God brought in my life at the right time, at the right season. And I wanted his name to mark this remembrance that God always provides the right relationships at the right time to help you move through something or to grow in some way or to be supported in some way or to be served. And that's what we experience. We experience people come around us in many different ways, and family and people that we didn't know that just were sending money in the mail. So what did you learn in the basement? Oh, man. Whew.
So there was a reason why you were there. I know you got something out of it.
I have to pause because that basement to me was, I just need to say it, like language doesn't define me, but like hardship creates perseverance. Mm-hmm. And it creates something that you didn't know that you had inside of you to step to the plate. And ultimately, this is my belief. I know God is real. I've experienced his faithfulness in so many different ways. I can't list them off in one moment. But the reality is that I can't see him right now. I can feel him, but I can't feel, I can't see him and actually know that he's moving this. I believe it comes down to us making the choice in our life of taking ownership and taking responsibility. And for so long, I know from my story, I pushed off my responsibilities to my wife. I pushed them off to the company I worked for in some ways. I didn't actually fully give myself and devote completely every part of who I was in belief that I could do it. And I personally believe that God's faithfulness in that process was allowing me to experience such pain and loneliness that I couldn't rely on anybody else, that I had to trust myself. And I had to be reminded that he made me in his image and he lives inside of me, that I have literally everything inside of me to heal everything outside of me. that he made a way for that, but it takes ownership for me to actually live that.
That's powerful. That is so powerful. Oh man, gosh, that story is wild. I think even for me recently, understanding what God built me to do and having the confidence to do it have been two things I've struggled with. I know God made me to do these certain things, but I've actually, for the longest time, been avoiding them because I don't want to do those things because I don't think I can do those things, right?
Right.
And I know I've done some pretty cool things so far, but it's just the enemy, right? Like the enemy doesn't want you to think you're worthy or you're capable or you can do all the things that God designed you to do. And thankfully, my basement wasn't as bad as yours, but there have been moments in my life where, like, you just know, like, God is talking to you and he is there with you and he's reminding you that he put this thing inside of you. You've accepted the Holy Spirit and now you can do all the things that he designed you to do, right? But you have to believe it.
Yes.
Like, people ask me all the time, well, how come you're always so confident about doing things and how come you don't worry and this and that? I'm like, what's the point of worrying? Like, why wouldn't I be confident? This is why God made me. Like, if this is God's plan, it's going to work out. So I'm not going to sweat it. I'm going to do all I can and let him do everything else because I've gone through those difficult times where I had to rely on him and I had to remember his promises to me. And once you remember these promises, then it's a wrap.
Yes.
It's a wrap.
Yeah, I love that. You know, one of the things too that I'm so thankful for how God's nearness, like I love the scripture that says that he never leaves us nor forsakes us. And honestly, that's probably equally the message that I got in the basement, that in my arrogance, right, of throwing up the double deuce bird and being angry and cussing out God and by myself, you know, that his faithfulness was willing to stay with me in that he wasn't ashamed of me, right? Like he was willing to allow my ignorance and my arrogance that I have control, right, of this moment, right? Like, yes, there's a partnership that I need to step into, but also, like, he is so kind. I love that his kindness leads us to repentance is another scripture that I love. That, like, and repentance is renewing our minds. That word actually means going back to the penthouse, like going back to the place where God resides. That, like, his kindness allowed us to get back to a space of seeing how he sees things. Right? I remember vividly during this time, one of my friends who's a doctor, and unfortunately, his sister, who was one of the most influential women in my life, died of cancer. And I was the first time I had stepped out of my house because the clouds were covering the sun. And I remember walking across the street just talking to him, and he was like, Nate, he said, you know how much I love my sister and how impactful she was to me and to the world. But he said, I can tell you how many times I've sat across from one of my patients and I got to talk about the goodness of God and that he meets us in our pain. He meets us in all these stories. And, like, yes, I would take my sister back, no question, but I know God's faithfulness is doing something deeper than I realized. And if it wasn't for this deep grief that I had to go through, I wouldn't be able to sit with the woman I sat with yesterday who just lost her husband and that she just broke her ankle and she's going through a surgery and she can't walk now. She doesn't have her husband to walk with her, to help her at all, right? Like, I get to sit with her and cry with her, to really know what it is to weep with people, those that weep, right? I know for so long I could rejoice for those who could rejoice, but weeping and knowing how to get in people's space of being in their grief, that's a whole nother story. Like, we get uncomfortable, right? And that's another place in the basement. Like, I had to get really comfortable with my grief. I had to get really comfortable that, like, I'm not just turning this on and off. Like, I have to own that I'm in pain, not just physically, but emotionally. And that was a pathway where God met me. That was an intersection that I got to see. In my arrogance, he was faithful. In my inability to see that there's more than this moment, he met me. And now I get to look back on this time where for so long it was bitterness and anger. It's turned into gratefulness and depth. And that I get to share this story not out of a place of, like, look at me, but look at God's faithfulness. Like, I had to show up and own in some story, but the reality is I didn't know the end result, right? I didn't know how this was going to form me, to know how to be with people and open up men's hearts so that they can show their sadness, that they can offer their stories, right? Because I know for me, being a man and knowing that When sadness would come up in my nature in the past, I would stuff it because I don't want nobody to see that weakness, right?
You can't be soft.
You can't be soft, right? Especially if I have two older brothers, right?
Yeah.
You know, and then playing sports and all these things, right? Like this bravado that it doesn't create service to the greater good. It creates ego that blocks people from actually knowing like the beauty of being human and where we get to ask for help. And that's the other thing. Like we had to ask for help. We didn't want to ask for help. We had to ask for help.
I hate asking for help.
Right?
I hate it.
Right?
But I know I have to do it sometimes and I can't stand it. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. Yes.
Isn't it funny how, as like God-fearing Christians, we can still be arrogant? Like we know there's a God out there, yet we're still arrogant.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's human nature, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what side you stand on. Like we all have that place of, wanting our way.
Yeah.
You know?
That's crazy. All right. So let's talk about the hat. You got a hat sitting over there on the table.
Yeah.
What's that all about?
Yeah. So I have two hats. This one is my, I say my father's blessing hat. My other hat, we referenced before, was about a former drug lord that gave up that life and surrendered over to the divine and seeing God meet him where he was at. And he gave me that hat.
Where did he give you the hat?
This was at down in Nashville. A friend paid for me when I went through after the shingles and the kidney stones. My friend said, "Listen, I want to pay for you to come down for this weekend retreat." And it was nothing like a retreat. It was something that I had never experienced before. It was this deep, layered healing journey that I went on. And there was a group of people that I had never met except for like one other person and the leader that paid for me to go. And actually, the ironic thing, I'm not going to name names, but I prayed. I drove. It was the first time I had drove my car in I think at that time it was 6 months. And I drove. I got down to Indianapolis, and I pulled to the side, and I'm like, "What the heck am I doing?" One, it was really hard to drive, and then two, it's like this is crazy. I have no clue what I'm walking into. And I said, "God, I need to know you're with me." And I said, "I want to see this specific person." This was a person that's in the comedy world. And this is something I felt called and created to start offering myself as. And sure enough, as I pulled into this property, the very person that I identified, who I had not seen for 3 years prior, got out of their car right when I got out of my car. And I just was like, okay, I'm where I need to be, right? And then God even made it even further. I walk into this house, and this gentleman comes in who I'd never met before, and he sits across from me, and he's wearing an Indiana University hoodie, and that's my alma mater. And it's actually the exact hoodie I've been asking my in-laws for, 15 years to buy me. I still don't own. and I said, "Oh man," I said, "IU." I said, "Did you go to school there? Are you from Indiana?" He goes, "No." He said, "Actually, I came in from LA for this." He said, "But my grandparents were pastors in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Have you heard of it?" And I said, "Well, actually, yeah, I just drove from Fort Wayne to here." And so that's where I met this gentleman. He was European, and his story was radical. And so I had this moment where I, literally the pain that I had in my eye for the shingles for 6 months completely left. The story of it and the pain itself. Now, I wasn't 100% healed, but where I was feeling, it went from 100% pain down to 20%. And the story that I kept telling myself that God doesn't care, that I'm going to live this the rest of my life. I'm going to wake up and feel the nerve pain in my body, completely left. And I had this beautiful moment where I opened my eyes and he put this hat on me. And I wear that hat to remind myself that I can do hard things. I wear often parenting. So my kids know that hat. It's like, "Oh, Daddy needs a little help right now." Yeah. I'm reminded that God's with me. And now this hat that I have here is actually my dad's old hat. And he saw me wearing that all the time, and he wanted to know the story. And he said, "Well, I want to give you a hat to remember the Father's blessing on your life." And so this hat to me signifies my Heavenly Father and my earthly Father's blessing on my life. That he's given me, my dad has given me so much opportunity in my life, because even today, we're still making ends meet right now as we step out in faith with where my wife and I are with partnership and doing these new things. And today, my dad handed my wife a check, and he paid for the semester of my youngest son's first year of school. Right?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
School ain't cheap.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I didn't ask for it. And he knows me well enough to where it's not that I couldn't receive it, but he's like, he knew that like it would hit different having my wife open it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just him. He knows that. Like he knows my heart, and he wants me to feel that he's not undermining me, but he's honestly just being a father who wants to bless his children.
Yeah, man. So how many kids do you have? You said four kids?
4 kids.
How old are they?
Yeah. So Emma, she is 9. Ruby is 7. Deacon just turned 5. Today is his 5th birthday.
Happy birthday, Deacon.
Yeah. And then Johnny's 2. He turns 3 this December.
Oh, man, that's cool. We've got to get our kids together one of these days.
Yeah.
Next time you come to Florida or we come up here, we got to get them together.
We're in.
Yeah.
We would love that.
So you're big on relationships and energies and like this, like vibing with certain types of people. Like, do you remember when we first met and how... No, go ahead. I'll answer the question first.
I think it was at a food show. Was it?
It was at a food show,
Yeah.
I believe. Yeah. And we were introduced by a mutual friend. Well, actually, no, it wasn't. Because you came to the offices one day, I think.
Yes. You were just moving. Yes.
I had just moved there.
Yes.
But I don't know, man. Like, ever since that first interaction, it's super vague to me, but you always were, like, there. I don't know what it was, but we just like clicked. We just clicked.
Yeah.
And then I saw you at a couple of food shows, but still, it was always like a really like brief, quick interaction. I think the next time I saw you after that was like a year later, and I was throwing a party. It was at ANC in Las Vegas, and I'd booked out the top of this rooftop bar or whatever, having a big networking event or whatever.
Yep.
And you came by, and people don't know this, but it was a blessing when everybody pitched in to help cover the cost of that party.
Yeah.
Because somebody ordered one too many drinks that night. But you came and you saved the day. But even still, it was just like a really quick interaction. Then I would like see you or hear from you like randomly. But then, I mean, it was a year or 2 ago when I was launching this company. We really connected.
Yeah.
And it's just funny how God puts certain people in your life, and it's maybe not always like, hey, like right now, you guys are gonna rock together, but he leaves that in your head or in your heart, and it could be later. Like later, you two are gonna connect and do something. And I firmly believe that you meet people for 3 reasons: either for you to serve them, them to serve you, or for you guys to do something cool together. And I see us doing a lot of cool stuff together because I want to serve you just as much as you want to serve me. So let's just do stuff together.
I love that.
So what are some of the newer things that you're working on? Tell me about this website that I should have looked at that I didn't because I wanted to hear it from you first.
Yep. So just to preface it, my wife and I, first we created a course together for helping families in their postpartum days, right? So it's called Peaceful Postpartum, and it's emotional wellness for postpartum parents. Because as you know, that crazy transition of bringing a child into your house and all the things that happen in your wife's body, all the things that are happening in your body, right? Like it's actually like it's extremely vulnerable, right? And so I knew that like seeing this course, I started seeing how many guys were coming to the table. Now the course really is built for the moms, but we have a section for men. And in that process, I just started seeing more and more men coming who are like, man, I need help. I feel like I don't know how to be present with my wife. She wants more of me, and I don't know how to offer it. She says that I'm cold. She says that I feel like I don't care, and that's just not true, right? And I know through my own experience that ultimately you learn it. Like it's behavior that we learn. We're conditioned that way by societal norms, and most likely I have amazing parents, but even them, they didn't know how to. Like my mother, her father had polio when she was 3, so a man that was very successful in the world's terms, started his own business, could fly planes, all these things, instantly was in a wheelchair. And so from age 3, saw a lot of pain. Not only that, he had cancer too at the same time, diagnosed with polio and cancer the same day. Gosh. And so she talked about like this story of just seeing her father never complain about it. Like, and it is very admirable. I say this, it's very admirable to me. I still feel like goosebumps thinking about his strength. But at the same time, I got to know that there was some part of him that wishes that he could have broken down a little bit and show how painful it was. Because she always said, I only heard him complain one time over the many years. Now, that's beautiful, but what that message creates is that you're not safe to share your feelings. And my mom, she's amazing, but ever since I was a little kid, like she'd always say, like if something hard happened, oh, somebody else has got it worse. And yeah, that's true. But right now, as a 3-year-old boy, I just need a mom to hold me, right? And so I know that there's so many stories of men who feel that way. And so I have felt led to create resources for men to know how to get into their body. I think so many of us, men and women, are disembodied because of stories in their life that told them they weren't safe. And I began to notice that story. So for me, I didn't notice this until I got married. And my wife, being a therapist, she's really good at reading people. And she recognized that like I had these little tics that when I was single, it didn't bother anybody. But when you get married, everything affects everything.
Yeah.
And she's like, yo, like, why are you freaking out at the park? Like, why are you losing your mind at our kids about like how they can't pick up sticks? Like, this seems crazy. And I'm like, I'm doing that? She's like, yeah, like you're like going like Mach 10 on intensity anytime we're at public parks or we're at pools. Well, I didn't realize it didn't happen until actually 2020. And honestly, this is why I believe some way I got shingles was I started facing the stories of my pain. And at age 3, I witnessed a boy drowned, and it was traumatizing. And I still vividly remember that time. It was after a massive rain, and kids were swimming in this little pond that was self-made by the rain. And I was with my mom and my brothers. And instantly, these boys, they were far enough out, they started screaming for help. Well, the boy, he didn't know he stepped in a ravine. If he went to the left or the right, he would have been out of it. And my mom, unfortunately, she was at a loss. She was stuck because if she goes into the water, me at the time as a 3-year-old boy is going in that water too. So she had to make a choice. Go and try to save this boy with the chance that my son who can't swim goes in the water. So she ran to the next closest house because we didn't have cell phones then to go call the police. And it was terrifying. Now, I was terrified of water my whole life, but I never really knew that until finally I had this moment where this friend who paid for me to go down to this weekend experience, that he helped me start becoming aware of these stories that shaped me. And so that fear of a 3-year-old boy was still with me. And it came out when I became a parent. And my wife could see it. And she's like, listen, like, it's painful to go with you public places because, like, you shut down. And, like, generally speaking, it's just not, like, it's not fun being around you. And, like, that killed me. And so I started reflecting on, like, wow, okay. So I found that research shows from 0 to 7, this is where we define our emotional self, what's safe to express and what's unsafe to express. Now, the beautiful thing is we can change that. And that's what I'm working. That's where I'm putting my heart and my intention into is that I've created an online course called The Decisive Man, Awakening Men's Clarity. Because once we're able to get into our body and know that our emotions were given to us by God as to be lightning rods to the divine, to experience life at its maximum. Because the reality is, if you don't know how to experience your full grief, your pain, to go to the basement per se, and feel it and express it, you don't know what the full joy, the opposite, the polarity of that is.
Yeah.
Because when we know and we experience that depth of pain and raw emotion, right? The pain and knowing the story and contextualize it, feel it, embrace it. Like it's I'm speechless. It's words can't express it. It's freaking hard. But it's so beautiful because that's where God meets us. This is where we meet a creator that cares about every aspect of our life. And he wants us to express our feelings in a way that is healthy and functional, no longer dumping our pain, no longer being the crazy man at a park and freaking out on his kids and everybody else's kids and thinking like, what's wrong with that guy?
Pick up that stick.
Yeah, right. Put that stick down. And so that then eclipses us to when the joy comes, right? Like it is so much more beautiful and profound. And so this course, it takes men on a journey. A 4-week journey of infancy, getting into a space of being able to reflect on our stories, what we're coming with. Because most of us, we don't realize what's subconsciously happening and how we show up in our world. And so when we reflect on seeing that and then be kind to ourselves and observe it instead of judging it, because ultimately that's what I did forever. I judged myself that I wasn't strong enough. And so this course takes men on a journey of 4 weeks of getting to a space to where they can finally embrace this aspect of themselves. And what happens is you realize it gives you this secret power of being human. And we are drawn to people who are real. We're drawn by people that are willing to show those softer edges, right? And so I'm helping men to graft and sharpen their edge so that they can offer themselves in whatever context they feel most deeply called to. And it is awesome. Actually, I was doing one-on-one coaching, and I was taking them through this process, and I need to impact more men. I need to create opportunity for people to go through this at any time. So I just launched this round. Actually, last night was my first call with 8 guys. And oh man, it was just amazing. Them showing up, being real and being honest. And so it's a practice of embodiment. There's some different things like we did before we started, right? Of getting present. Mm-hmm. And that's the art of life. The people who are present, they're the people that really actually are alive.
Yeah. I love what you're doing. I feel like in the past, men had to be, like you said, masculine. Mm-hmm. Like it's all about like masculinity and this and that, right?
Yep.
But now I feel like in culture and society, they want the complete opposite. Like it is wildly opposite of, back in the 80s or the 90s, right?
Yeah.
But what you're talking about is like real masculinity. Like there's both sides. Like you're a man. God made you to be a man, but yeah, you have feelings too. Got to learn how to manage and handle them, right? Handle emotions because he gave you them for a reason. Like Jesus got angry, he flipped the table. right. Like, you can still be masculine.
Yes.
And I feel like, and I'm not saying that you need to be masculine to be a leader, but I mean, masculinity could be used for good things. Like men can be leaders, women can be leaders too. But I mean, typically it's the guy leading the household, that sort of thing, right? But you're teaching us how to do it better.
Yeah. That's one of the things too. Like that's why I love how God's made man and woman, right? Like actually we have, whether you realize or not, we have estrogen in our bodies as men. Yeah. And so, and women have testosterone in their bodies.
Yep.
And so, you can see it can get to a point to where, if it's not healthily functional, it can look and be expressed in ways that aren't healthy. And dysfunctional. And so, my wife, she has modeled that gift of knowing how to partner in a way that has the edges of both, right? And you can see that, like, and CEOs that are women that like they have to, generally speaking, have to go into a masculine energy because that's how our world operates, right?
Yep.
Now, I believe it's actually shifting. We always go from one extreme to the next. And the hope is that it comes into a balance, right? And like that we can have a balance where women can have more opportunities to lead and have more influence because we desperately need them to have that role. But to be a man and own the whole personhood of a man is a man that's willing to lay his life down.
Yeah.
Who's not afraid of trying something new. Like he'll meet the fear. Right. That's one of the things I teach my children is that, like, I'm not saying, oh, hey, you need to be brave. I say, activate that bravery inside of you, buddy. Like, we already have everything. Like, again, going back to scripture, we lack no spiritual blessing from heaven above. We have everything inside of us already to heal everything outside of us. So I'm not saying you need to do this or become that. No, you already own this. You get to own it now.
Yeah.
You get to express it. I get to offer this, right? So I'm even learning and changing my language around these ways, how I talk about myself. Like, and knowing how to offer what, I know God's created me to lead in as a man, right? And so, it's really a gift. And the humor side is still happening. I still deeply feel called to, I've been performing comedy for the last 2 years almost. I was going to
ask you about that. Yeah. How's that going?
It's a learning opportunity. I'll tell you that.
That sounds petrifying to me. I could never do that.
The first day, it was so cool. The first day that I went on stage, this is where, again, remembering like God's providence in my life. The first day, I get there like an hour before because I knew I needed to like just feel like the energy of the room. I wanted to like prepare. And I remember sitting in my chair and like literally my whole body was like shaking out of terror. I was terrified. Literally on the verge, like, so when we first moved back to Indiana, that's like part of the story that I guide men through is that like when we moved back to Indiana, there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And the idea behind that is that there's only so much that you can put on a face that you're okay to where your body finally says, no, you got some things you need to work out here. And so when we moved to Indiana from Philly, I started experiencing panic attacks, which was crazy because I had never like dealt with anxiety like that before, besides going through bone cancer. And it took over my life. And that was like the beginning of me to start seeing these pathways of how to actually regulate my body in these simple, practical ways of how I move my body, how I breathe, what I'm focusing on, what I'm giving energy to, what I really believe, right? What are my actions saying beyond what my words are saying? And so that was like the beginning of me starting seeing these beautiful ways of starting to show up in my life where I was terrified. And so I'm here on the first night of performing, and like I literally feel like I'm gonna pass out. And I'm like, what am I going to do? I was thinking about, I'm just going to leave, you know? Like, I'm not going to do this, you know? And instantly,
take my man card, I'm out of here.
Right. Yeah, I'm out. Scratch my name off. And no, but I had this moment of clarity. All of a sudden, God took me back. He said, do you remember when you had that panic attack? Do you remember what I taught you about your breath? Like ruah, okay, is the Hebrew meaning of breath. That our breath, are the breath of God. That literally when we breathe, and I have this vision that I'm breathing all of God's spirit into my body. And it's accessing the places that needs support. And so I remembered even right now, might be TMI, but I have no shoes on and no socks on right now.
I noticed.
I got my feet firmly in the ground because there's something about, again, God gave us to be here on this earth. So we're in partnership. Again, creation's groaning and longing for expectation of the sons and daughters to be revealed. So how do we partner with it? So there's simple ways of knowing, like, you know, one of the nights I end up walking up barefoot and doing a bit. And people are like, man, that was hilarious. It was even more crazy. You had no shoes on, man. That's crazy, you know? But like, I remembered that moment, like, oh, okay, I know how to get through this. I went through the shingles. I went through the panic attacks. I went through the bone cancer. I have everything I need to know to get through this. So I started doing this breathing exercise. And I simply started just kind of moving my hands together, like rubbing my fingernails together, just to start moving the energy out of the stuck energy of fear out of my body. And so from that moment, boom, it shifted from me being terrified to like, oh man, I'm built for this.
Yeah, got fired up.
I'm ready. Yeah. And that night I killed. It was unbelievable. Still, like, you know, it wasn't the best, but it was at that time clearly the best time I had ever performed. And it was so cool because afterwards, it wasn't just in my head. Like there was literally, I felt like I had an entourage that followed me off the stage. That people were like, hey, here's my phone number. I want to do a podcast with you. And at that time, I was like, oh, thank you. Like, you know, I didn't say at the time, but like later reply back, I want to stay hidden.
Yeah,
you know,
so high.
Yeah, like I'm not ready to move into a space of like be known in this way yet.
Well, it seems like you're ready now.
Yeah.
You're ready now.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It is, you know, being mindful how I go about it is important to me with the ages of my kids and making sure that I'm not like partitioning my responsibilities of showing up in the home. But I really believe God's faithfulness. Like that's one friend said, like, you know, if you do this with comedy, like, dude, you're going to be gone all the time. I'm like, who says? Like, yeah, that's how the industry is. But like, if I really believe that God's called me to this and in my heart, I want to be a present dad, not just by my money or just by like, you know, text or all those things are beautiful, but I want to be in their life. And so I'm believing that God can make a way that I can show up more and more in these ways of making people laugh. Because ultimately I know and believe that humor is the great equalizer.
Yeah.
It allows us to neutralize our belief systems and allows us to open our heart. And ultimately that's my desire, is that like I would be able to help people open their heart and see the humanity to where God can meet us and see the beauty of a partnership that I believe he created long before that moment they received or believed, that like he was already offering these beautiful supernatural ways of meeting them where they're at.
Yeah. It's difficult to be present being a father that's on the grind and hungry and wanting to, you know, build success, right? And build generational wealth for their families and those sorts of things.
Yes.
I remember when I left my school district to go work in the sales job on the industry side, I was talking to my current boss and mentor at the time, and I was like, why does God want me to do this? Like, how is this going to further his kingdom? And he was like, man, like right now you're just in Pasco, but if you take this job, like you can be the example and talk to people throughout the country about your faith. And I was like, oh, wow. I was like, okay, I'm going to go accept this job.
Yes.
And then, but me being human, when I accepted this job, I took it too far. Like I was always on the road. And not just because I'm a hard worker, because I wanted to be the best and outsell everybody else on my team and other companies and all that, but it was like my first sense of freedom that I guess I never really had growing up, like whether in high school or college. Because I mean, my parents are immigrants, right? So it was like school, sports, win, success. Like there is no failure, no time for partying. And that's what I got a chance to do whenever I got this freedom. And I'll never forget, like my youngest son, Jackson, I would come home and he wouldn't even, like he would recognize me, but he wanted nothing to do with me. And at this time, he was probably like 2 or 3. And it's not like he didn't like me, but it's just mommy was there, right? So who's this other guy that's here, you know, a couple days out of the week, whatever. So mom got all the attention. And it kind of got to me after a while. And that's when God was like, look, dude, slow your roll. You're taking this way too far. And it took years for me to build that relationship back with my son. It's embarrassing saying it, but I'm sure it's something that a lot of men go through. And now I'm just glad I was blessed with the ability to recognize my faults and have a really, really patient, amazing wife that supported me the whole time and didn't kill me. But it's like now, it's like I don't want to go anywhere. Like I just want to be home. Like I still like to travel, but it's difficult sometimes, more often than not, to have to leave. Like I just want to be home with the family. And I joke at my wife all the time because you're talking about like masculinity in women. Well, that's my wife, right? Like, she's the boss.
I know that's like, I got one at home too.
Yeah, she's the boss. And I love it. But I can't wait for her to be the one that's traveling. So I can stay home and like cook and clean and do all that stuff with the kids and hang out and take them to after school events and all that stuff. But it's difficult finding that balance. But like now I'm to the point to where, okay, like I'm the face of the company. I'm going to accept this because that's who God made me to be. I need to be a better steward of my time and my team and like everything, right? And when I travel, my wife always says, like, whenever I leave, she's like, make it worth it. Just like this trip. Like this trip is no joke. Like I came here, I got up super early to catch the first or second flight out to get to Indianapolis, just to rent a car, to drive to Fort Wayne, to do 2 podcasts, and then to drive all the way to Milwaukee tonight to be available for another podcast tomorrow morning so I could be there the following day to meet with the client and then to do a podcast the following day to fly to Milwaukee on Friday. It's wild. But you know what? Wild. I'm going to make it worth it.
That's right.
It is going to be worth every minute of me being away from my family because that's why God built me. That's why I'm here.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And also I'm a guy and I'm super competitive, and just like how crazy that all sounds makes it more motivating for me, because I'm gonna say it again, I haven't gone through suffering like you, but the little bit I've gone through, I use it as fuel, and it almost like thickens your skin, I guess you could say. And it's like, the suck, you embrace it and you make it worth it and you use it as fuel. So I'm just fired up.
Yes.
Like, I can't wait to finish out this week. It's going to be awesome. So
I love that.
Yeah.
And we need that. That's the thing. That's what it is, you know, like it's not just one person, their story, like the story of all and how that forms. Like literally you are what I needed, right? Like I need to be able to tap into that edge for myself to remember that, like, because I can fall into passivity really easily. And so when I see somebody who's hungry and willing to do the hard work, right, that inspires me to know that there's another space that I can inhabit to actually embrace what I'm created to serve and lead in, right? And so, man, it is truly a joy to witness the evolution of meeting you at that office and your beautiful wife, and you literally, I think, just pulled in, like literally the day that, you just literally pulled in and moving to South Carolina, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And you know, to where we are now, right? And like, you know, getting to run alongside each other and like champion one another, right? And like, and that's what I loved about Jonathan David and their relationship, is that it was this camaraderie, but also it was like this, like, hey man, I'm going to push you because I'm going hard. Yeah. Right.
You better step your game up. You better go hard too.
Right. Yeah. I actually, people who may not be able to see this, but like you have the orange cord and I have the blue, and I see things of colors, and I thought I knew Marlon's gonna bring the fire and I'm gonna bring the revelation.
Yeah.
Like the blue like signifies revelation, and orange is the fire, right? And so, and you do that, man. Your energy, your fire, and your willingness to like go hard is something that inspires me. And it reminds me that there is something different that I know I can step into because Marlon's doing it too. So
if I can do it, anybody can do it. But I mean, that means a lot. Hearing that from you, truly, truly means a lot. And it's because we got this arc reactor, I like to call it, in our hearts, called the Holy Spirit. So we can do anything.
Yes.
And it just hit me. I was like, how wild would it be if we met in North Augusta, South Carolina, all those years ago, just for this moment?
Right, yeah.
Because that could be the reason.
Yes.
It literally could be the reason.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, it is so true. Like I've been reflecting that in my relationships, with my wife, just saying that like, in this season, it feels different, and that's okay. Who knows what the future holds with those relationships, like, and honoring where they're at, and knowing ultimately, like, if I was like, oh man, like I was hoping that like, we would have ran side by side during that season, which, I had that opportunity, but I wasn't feeling called to at that time. Yeah. Now in this season, man, it's a joy to witness, how God works all things for the good of those that love him, right? It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, thinking about your season and what you learned being in the basement, and you said that was pretty much to remember that God is with you, right? Well, I would probably say like the apex of my season was one day, and talk about spiritual warfare, man. It was wild, like wild, and that's a story for another podcast. But when I asked God, and I was like, why am I going through this? Like, why are you letting this happen to me? I know what's happening, and you're letting it continue to happen.
Right.
You know what he told me? So you'll never forget. And he never wanted me to forget how badly the enemy didn't want me to do what he had told me to go, what God had told me to go do. The enemy wanted to stop me. And God was like, so you never forget, this is how bad he doesn't want you to have it. And whenever bad things happen or challenges happen that I'm going to overcome through my Lord Jesus Christ, that's just a reminder that someone else doesn't want me to do what I'm supposed to be doing or what I'm doing right now. So let me use that as fuel.
Love that.
And keep moving forward.
Yeah, that's so good. I love that.
Yeah.
I want to add one other thing that, as I heard you say that, it reminded me of a story. So this summer I got to go and sit with different indigenous tribes in another country.
Oh, cool.
And to me, an owl signifies wisdom, and I think about God's wisdom and how it's endless, right? Like there's just this profound wisdom that God's Spirit gives us that we have. And then this is a buffalo tooth right here that they made a trade with another tribe. One of the things I love, I want to learn from other people. I often want to share my story and about how God's met me, but also I think there's something powerful sometimes just to sit with people with not the idea that I need to change them, that I just want to learn and grow. And so they shared about this story of how they got it from this other tribe. And to the buffalo, if you've not heard this story before, when there's a storm in real life, when there's a storm, the cow, for instance, will run away from the storm, and the storm will chase them. And it's always like this idea of their fears always chasing them, and they're never facing it. Where the buffalo, when the storm hits, they see the storm, and they run towards it. They face the challenge, and they run towards it. They run through it because they know the quicker they get through it, there's something on the other side.
Yeah.
And the idea that I wear this in remembrance, that I'm going to face the hard things. I'm going to face it. I'm going to run towards it. Because the majority of my life before that basement, truly, even with bone cancer, was I was running away from the storm. I was constantly in fear. When is the next unfortunate thing that happened to me? Because I didn't go into more, but there's other things in my childhood that I experienced that was terrifying. And that shaped me to be afraid so often. It was unspoken. People didn't know this by my energy and the way that I show up and make people laugh and be myself. But inside, I had this inner narrative of being like, dude, you're going to die young, and ultimately something bad is going to happen again. So I would always just try to run away from it. And through shingles and facing that storm and owning it has given me this understanding that, man, I'm gonna show up, and I'm going to be the buffalo. I'm going to run towards that storm, and I'm going to get through it on the other side.
I love that buffalo name. I'm going to call you Buffalo from now on. Buffalo.
And ironically, the building here on the other side is a massive mural of a buffalo too.
That's cool. So So what's the logo for your company?
So
I mean, it should be a buffalo.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. I'll save that for another podcast for my wife to join, because she's got this pretty epic description of how God gave her a vision for a logo. And it's like, you literally, and then not only that, like she hears this, draws it, and then she's at a church service. And during the church service, she looks over and like the light is hitting perfectly to where there's a rainbow design on the floor of the exact logo that she drew the day before.
Wow. That's crazy.
And she could describe it. That's amazing. But then when she describes what the logo means, it's like, okay, all right, this is unbelievable.
So I was thinking earlier that I need to meet your wife. I haven't met her yet. I haven't had that pleasure. But how cool would it be if we did a couples podcast, my wife and your wife, and we just chop it up one evening?
We would love that. That would be amazing.
That would be fun. Yeah. So tell me about the logo for the company, your company.
Yeah. So our brand is called Life Interconnected. Mm-hmm. And the idea behind that is that God's made us, like him being a tripart God, right? The Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, that he's made us tripart beings, that we have our body, we have our emotions, and we have, always, like get caught in the moment sometimes, like we have our body, our emotions, and, why am I drawing a blank right now?
Dude, it happens to me all the time. I was doing this pitch the other day to a bunch of clients, and I forgot the name of a documentary that I wanted to create.
I love it. Yeah, so our mind, our emotions, and our spirit, okay? And so this aspect that there's layers to our being, right? And so, like, for instance, she always says that, like, counseling has an aspect of helping the person. But if their nutrition isn't right, that's going to impact the way they think, right? So all these pieces of how they're connected, and God gave her this very clear outline of understanding the whole person, right? And so when we start realizing these parts, these components of who we are, and learning how to actually, again, not judge, but observe them, it gives us awareness to know how to actually start shaping them in the way that is healthy and not dysfunctional. And so Life Interconnected is the brand that we created together. And that logo is the one that I referenced to. Now, the course that I created, I have not created a logo specifically for that just yet. But the idea of Life Interconnected, I love that because there's so many different like intersections of life that are interconnected.
Yeah.
And how God meets us.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
That's great. Well, where can people get a hold of you to book you for speaking engagements, for mentorship, for the courses, for all of that?
Yes. So right now you can meet me at my email. It's my name, Nathan R. Todd at iCloud.com. I'm not strong on the socials. I'm stepping into that here in the future. Like I said, I've purposely been hidden for a long time. I really wanted to grow in knowing how to use these platforms in a way that wouldn't pull me away from actually serving the ways that I know I feel called and created to serve in. But so the best way is to reach me through that, or hello@lifeinterconnected.com as well. So Nathan, Nathan, R, Todd, Todd, at iCloud.com, or hello@lifeinterconnected.com, just like how it sounds.
I love it. Well, Nathan Buffalo Todd, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today and to share your story. And I just look forward to watching you do your thing, man, and running through those storms. Love it.
My pleasure. Appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
Anytime.